Hello and welcome to this episode. This one is so important to me personally. If you've been listening to the pod for a while, you might have heard Christen and I do earlier episodes on Hekate Supper. We are deep into this long-term project, exploring the history and significance of Hekate Supper, which are also known as the Deipnon meaning supper. In this one, we are talking about the meaning in the meal. And we brought into the conversation Amanda, who is a mental health professional who keeps the key of Psychologica, the mind, in the coven. We wanted to bring her into the conversation to really help us unlock the meaning of the meal. Why did the ancients do the meal? Why are we so drawn to this ritual today? We also talk about some of the different ways that we have created Hecate's supper. We talk about making the dark goddess cheesecake from entering Hecate's garden. Christen and Amanda and I were deep into making cheese for Hecate using an ancient Roman recipe. If you want to learn more about that, you can join Covina. Just a reminder that we have the free, completely free, Crossroads and Keys retreat coming up in August. So if you are interested in that, you can just go to the website. I'll link to it in the show notes, and you can come and hang out with us for the weekend. We are going to celebrate Pharmakeia in all of its glory, and you might just connect with Medea. So enjoy this episode. I'd love to hear from you all. Just send me an email at info@keepingherkeys.com. And hail Hecate. Hello and welcome back, or maybe welcome for the first time to the Keeping Her Keys podcast. Today, we are discussing Hecate's supper, which is the tradition inspired by ancient practices of taking a meal to a crossroads after dark on the astrological new moon, which we call the dark moon. These were known as Hecate's suppers to the ancients. The word in Greek is Deipnon, so a lot of times you'll hear it referred to as Hecate's Deipnon. This was a very important part of the ancient religious calendar in certain areas of the Mediterranean. Unlike many deities who were honored in temples on high and so on, Hecate uniquely was propitiated at the three-way crossroads. And this reflects her primary role as she who watches over and abides at the liminal, the spaces in between, crossroads, thresholds, and so on. We are recording this on the astrological new moon, and I don't mean the same day as, I mean we time this, so we are starting to record this pod right at the precise moment of the astrological new moon in Cancer. And of course, Hecate, for many of us, really invokes something deep within us that stirs our emotions, awakens our intuition, and so on. So Christen and I have been doing this year-long exploration of the meaning of Hecate's supper. So today we are going to be diving into the meaning of the meal. We'll be talking about some of the components and the current feature of the meal that we've all been working on, which is making cheese using an ancient Roman recipe, and how we find meaning in making these parts of the meal using these ancient recipes, doing the research, getting the supplies and so on, how all of that for us is a way of honoring Hekate. So hi, Christen.
Hi.
So Christen and I invited Amanda, who is in the Mistai. So she is in the leadership program and a guide in Covina in the Coven. So Amanda is amazing. Amanda has just such a great spirit. She's so creative, energetic. She does a zillion things. You know, if you want something done, ask a busy witch and they'll get it done. So Amanda, tell us what you want us to know about you.
Oh, well, this is exciting. I'm excited to be here. And I love talking about food, and I love talking about kitchen witchery and honoring Hecate with food. That's so important in our house. We love to eat. I love to cook, love to make new things. And the recipes you guys have been putting out over the last year has been fantastic. I am trying to think. Um, been a part of Covina for a few years now. I feel like it was like originally when I started was keeping your keys, and then I came into Covina, and then I left and I came back. Mostly because I have a 5-year-old and I'm also a grad student, so I stay pretty busy with that, and a full-time employee. But this is so important to me, and you guys are so important to me, and so I'm just excited to be here and get to participate in this.
Oh, well, I'm glad you're here with us too.
Me too.
So Amanda, so we're going to start with you since you're the newcomer.
All right.
Okay, so you mentioned you love making the recipes that we put out.
I do.
And for everyone, so we're doing this live. We've got a live audience with us today. So I'm going to put up some slides so everyone can see them. And if you're listening to the pod, you'll find the link to where you can view the recording in the show notes. So I'm going to pop up the slides now just so we can see some of these things that we have been creating for Hecate.
Which I absolutely love Nicole's stuff.
So you recently made the Dark Goddess cheesecake from Entering Hecate's Garden. And I have such a special relationship with that cake. The cake is, of course, inspired by ancient cheesecakes. Then I put a really modern spin on it by adding chocolate, but it contains most of the ingredients in a traditional Hecate's meal. So it's a cheesecake, but there's also fruit, there's nuts, and then I added chocolate. And in a small shout out to Canada, I used maple syrup instead of honey. So you recently made this cake, and from everyone,
second time making it.
Your second time making it.
Yes,
I didn't know that.
Yes, it is. It is. It's a favorite in our house.
So if you're listening, the cake has a white chocolate strophalos, also known as Hecate's wheel, on the top of it. So, okay, you've made it twice.
I have.
So what is the meaning of the whole process, the meaning of making this cheesecake and then offering it to Hecate?
So for me, it's the time, it's the energy put into it. That connection. My hands are a part of it. Taking the time with the strophalos. I did not do the, I print out the strophalos and then, like you suggest, and doing it with the white chocolate from there. But taking that time and just having that focus. It's a very meditative experience. And it in the process of doing that, it enables me to kind of contemplate my relationship with Hecate. Where's it at? Like, where would I like for it to deepen? What could I do, to honor her in the way that I feel she should be honored? And so that's what I like about the cheesecake, is that even though I don't always have the opportunity to do big elaborate things for her, taking the time for the cheesecake, it's been, I think this is it last year or the year before is when I made it previously. And once a year, like, hey, you really mean a lot to me. And this is how, because she knows we love to eat around here.
I love that because I'm the same way. Not every dark moon is an elaborate Hecate's feast.
Yeah.
And when I do make the cheesecake, or like this time making the cheese, it's a way, like it's like how you would make something special for anybody you cared about.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. That love put into it. And this was an offering for the goddesses. And then this one was also an offering for Covina.
Mhm.
Because, you all mean so much to me and are such a part of my life. And so, I wanted to give that. I mean, I wish I could have, sent pieces out to everyone. I mean, that's, it just, that's what it was for me. And I can't always, do the big thing, but at least there I could.
I love that. And it's a hell of a good cheesecake.
It is. It is. Nobody complained in this house.
It's rich. You know what's so funny? In preparation for doing this, I put up a post on the socials and I included a picture of the Hecate's, of the Dark Goddess cheesecake. And someone commented and they said, "Hello, it's me, Hecate. DM me on it for instructions on where to send that cake."
Oh, she was right here.
I love it. It's like, "No, you're not fooling me. I don't think that's actually Hecate
Yeah,
on Facebook. I could be wrong."
They were all hanging out here that day.
Okay. All right. So we've got the cheesecake on the altar. Maybe we should loop back and do our invocation for today. I thought for our invocation, I would read this passage from Entering Hecate's Cave. We've already got our candles lit. We did a little bit of a ritual before we began recording. So we'll invite you to light your candle if you have one there, and you can just close your eyes and open up to this invocation. Hail Hecate, she who stands at the threshold between the worlds. I bring you a fine meal, knowing that you intend it for the animals and the downtrodden. They, like me, are yours. I feel the restless dead and the haggard spirits gathered in this place. They, like me, are yours. I am embraced by the darkest night, for the moon has covered her face out of respect for you. They, like me, are yours. So that is a little verse from Entering Hecate's Cave. Christen, I wonder if you would like to talk a little bit about the spirit of having a Deipnon experience, which I tried to capture in this little verse.
Right. So just that phrase, like they like me are yours, evokes so much emotion in me. Like I get that full body frisson, when I hear it or when I say it. And so making an offering for me is kind of like meeting Hecate where I'm at, whatever that may be. Whatever I have to offer, and knowing that I am part of something greater. So the other thing I think about, there's a saying that you have about like, what is it? My mind is the altar, my body is the temple, and my soul is shrine upon it. My life is the ritual, and so I see that as my life being the ritual. Right? Am I making sense?
Yes, you're making perfect sense.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just sort of showing up and being there and being present and connected to Hecate. And also, there's something so powerful about knowing that what I'm doing is part of this ancient lineage of Honoring Hekate, right?
I
Just
do.
makes me
Yeah, I
feel-
totally do.
yeah, it makes me feel very connected. Like there are threads of connection there.
And for me, it's like time walking.
Yeah.
I feel, when I do a pilgrimage to leave a crossroads offering, like I feel like when I wrote this, I had done this, I'd gone up to the cliffs here where we live, and the cliffs are it's granite, it's very open, it's on the ocean. It really reminds me of parts of the Mediterranean with those, open cliffs and the scrub, and there's no trees, and there's something very ancient, and there's a lot of spirits of place, the First Nations peoples, there's a lot of that energy. And when I came back, I was thinking, like, I don't feel alone. Like, I feel the spirits of place. I feel when you go to the crossroads, and when I mentioned like the haggard spirits and the restless dead, and for me to identify that Hecate is connected to all those on the margins.
Right.
And that the very act of propitiating her at a crossroads in ancient times was like signaled that, where she wasn't honored in a temple. We don't go, I mean, we know that at least in Lagina in modern day Turkey, there was a temple of Hecate where she was celebrated as Clydoca's keeper of the keys, and she was a temple goddess. But for many of the ancient places where she was venerated at the crossroads or at the entrance to temples. Which links to her, this is like her roles as Anodia, goddess of the crossroads, and Propylaea, the one at the threshold or the gate. She is a goddess who is where the people are,
Right.
especially people who may have been pushed aside by like mainstream society. And for me, that's what I was like attempting to capture in that verse, because it was one of those verses that just kind of fell out as is, hasn't been changed for years. And that sense of connection to what is deeper and greater than us. Like for me, I always encourage everyone. I know it for many people, it's not practical or safe to do this kind of ritual where you travel at night to a crossroads. But if you can, you need to do it at least once. However elaborate, whether you're like Amanda and you have a piece of dark goddess cheesecake, or, it's something simple, like you stop at the store and buy some Ritz crackers. I would give Hecate Ritz crackers, not saltines, like a special cracker, and a piece of cheddar. If that's what you can do, then that's Hecate will be well pleased by that, because I don't want to make people think in order to please Hecate, you have to spend 2.5 days making cheesecake or cheese, or, I mean, we did fish before, Christen, and all the research that we went into the type of fish that we offered. We did cakes for Hecate, which was a lot of research. So the basic components of an ancient Hecate supper, I think I put those on a slide just so we can talk about those. So there's different ancient sources. Christen and I spent many, many days last winter, which I'll never forget, following the threads all the way back to what the original source was for the ingredients in a Hecate supper, because we have a PDF of this out of print book, The Goddess Hecate, by the academician Stephen Ronan, and we have his description, which I'll just read. As is usually the case with offerings to the dead, the regular Hecate's Deipnon on the 30th of the month consisted of food. The specific articles, so far as they are mentioned, were megides, a kind of loaf or cake, the shape and ingredients of which are not clear, the manis or sprat, scarota or garlic, the trigle or mullet, sonetta, a sacrificial cake described by Harpocration as somewhat like the passata, eggs, cheese, possibly the bosunias, a kind of cake. So we started with that description, and other writers and websites follow this when they talk about what goes in a Hekate supper. And then so after we did all that research, and if you listen or watch to our Eggs for Hekate episode, you'll find we talk more about the research there. Then we did the Eggs for Hekate, which was interesting because all of our research showed that the eggs were actually raw.
Right.
Unlike the fish, which was prepared, unlike the cakes, which were cheesecakes, the bread, which when he talks about the sameta or the passata, like it's not pancakes, but it's not dissimilar to pancakes. We are not talking about a baguette.
Right.
So you have a really special relationship to the bread aspect of Hekate's supper. So maybe you can share a little bit about that journey. And I think we have a slide for that.
The pancakes.
The pancakes, which we call pancakes, but are more in the bread department and are akin to what Ronan was talking about.
Right.
In terms of what the bread actually would have been like. The cakes, it's pretty clear they would have been cheesecake. But the bread is a little bit of a mystery, but you did all the research to come to, and you landed on a certain type of bread, which we call pancakes today.
Right. Tiganides.
Okay, tell us about tiganides.
So I guess, what are they? Like an ancient version of pancakes.
Yeah, that's all they are.
Yeah.
Or flatbread. To make it sound more bready and say they're flatbread.
Right. And I know that they were usually doused in honey or walnuts or almonds or things that were sacred to Hekate. And it makes sense that they probably very likely would have been used as an offering. And so for me personally, there's another practice that was common on the Deipnon that was offering katharma, or like household sweepings, or like food leftovers. And so I started this thing because I make a crossroads pilgrimage to the Deipnon, or like on the Deipnon every month. I go to a very special crossroads, and I wanted something that was easily portable. And so I started making these pancakes because they were a good way to like hold and carry leftovers, and they became more and more elaborate. And I started like drizzling with honey and like adding ricotta and like adding lavender and all these nuts and fruits and stuff. And so it just kind of became my thing, Hekate's pancakes. Okay. And I had no idea that I was tapping into this like ancient lineage. So yeah, it's like, it's tradition now.
So just like, help me understand. So you didn't know what you were like, you didn't do research and then start making these pancakes?
No, not at all. It happened totally organically. Because like they're portable. Like I travel and I'll wrap them while I'm here talking about it. I like to wrap them in corn husks because if you're gonna leave them at a crossroads, like you want to leave them on something that's like biodegradable, right? You want to make sure it's all safe for the wildlife and everything. So yeah, I had no idea. I just really love pancakes, and it was a good way to incorporate, like I said, the katharma or the household leftovers, and it just evolved into this. Who knew tiganides?
Who knew? And then doing the research, although it's obscure, what the kind of bread actually was. Like we said, we're confident in saying that it's likely that tiganides or pancakes could have been the bread offering, because they were, I think if we look at Galen, I think I've got the passage from Galen, I do. So Galen's on the properties of foodstuff, writing, of course, after, like this is a like he's a historian writing about earlier practices. So he talks about these griddle cakes, and he uses the word tiganate, and then he talks about like how they're prepared. So it's interesting because you have your recipe that you developed up in Covina in Hecate's Crossroads, and we're reading what Galen, like I thought you must have done the research and you read this recipe and then you did it.
Mm-mm.
So you were really connected, like you were dialed in.
I'm telling you, I tapped into something greater than myself. Yeah. And it's fascinating to look back and see this. I mean, if you look through the slide that you were just on, it's just elaborate instructions for pancakes.
It's this. And then on this slide underneath, so these are, if you're watching, you can see that where Christen's Hekate tree is.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, so the Hekate supper, I think a lot of us like have a special location that we take these offerings on the dark moon. And there's such like profound meaning. Like, I don't feel obligated to do this. Like, I don't, because one of the things with like some of the writings about these ancient Hekate suppers, it's like, it was to propitiate Hekate, so you were protected from evil spirits and so on, like, because if Hekate wasn't well pleased, then her horde might come and get you. Like, I don't have that mentality at all. I do this because I really have found the center of my being through my connection with Hekate. So I don't feel obligated to do it. And if some months it's, you know, nothing super special, I also don't feel like I'm disappointing Hekate. And I give myself the grace to say, well, this month there isn't time for something elaborate, but just make the trek. Like, just go to the spot and do the thing, whether the spot is your altar and you know, cross 3 branches on your altar, or you can get out to a place like Christen and I go. Well, you actually leave home. I stay on my property.
I have done it at the end of the driveway. Yeah, I usually leave home.
Right, because the driveway can be like a 3-way crossroads, right? Because it's a T.
Yeah.
It's like your property, what came before, what came after. So that's fine.
So there's something also really moving about, like I was saying, meeting Hekate where you're at, whether or not you have an elaborate offering. Sometimes I'll give an energetic offering. Sometimes I'll like give up, you know, like an unhealthy habit and adopt a healthy habit. But I try to make it to the crossroads. I mean, even if it is the end of my driveway, like I try to go and have a moment with Hekate. And so there's something about meeting Hekate in that place that is centered in sort of like faith in yourself and faith in Hekate and faith in the journey. And I think about this idea of leaving the meal at the crossroads and walking away, right? And so that takes faith, right? Like to leave your offering in the right hands or in Hecate's hands, and like know that it's going to go where it needs to go, and that it's going to be what it needs to be. And I want to tell a little bit of a story. My first Deipnon offering, I went way, way out in the woods, deep into the Mississippi woods in the darkness. And I left my offering and the battery on my flashlight died. So I was in the middle of the woods in the dark, and I had to find my way back home. And though it was very much for me about like trusting the journey. And I don't know how to explain that. It was a very numinous experience, but it was a very powerful experience, like trusting Hekate and trusting myself. And so it's something that's something that making that trek is really special to me.
Yeah, it holds such a sacred place for me, like the trek. And I had a similar experience one time early on. I went up to the cliffs after dark. Even with a flashlight, it's really dangerous. You know, some of the cliffs are a few hundred meters down in different places. And I was scared. And for me, that going to the crossroads is unsettling. Like Hecate is unsettling. You know, she's this space between. She's lunar, she's magic, she's the light in the darkness. And it just holds such a central place to me. And I think, I don't know, Amanda, I'd like to get your thoughts on this. So doing these crossroads rituals, and a lot of times we're doing them on our own. They're very intimate, us and Hecate and the spirits, animals, whoever eats the food. It's not designed to be a show and tell. Like, this isn't designed, you know, I'm thinking like, if we place all, like, I'm thinking of like ancient temples or even like different places, like, you know, pagan organizations maybe today where, you know, they bring all the offerings, or even like in your home, like we have family altars and whatnot. And like you put the offering there and everybody can kind of see it and be like, look at us making offerings. Aren't we wonderful? But this is the opposite of this. I don't know. Have you ever thought of that before?
No, I that makes sense though. I know for like, so but I usually leave my offerings at the corner of our fence. And I have some candles out there, but you can't really tell that's what it's for. And we moved our compost over there, and so I set the offering at the compost. How it happens, I mean, right now, you know, I have chickens, and so they probably are like the first ones there. So they probably get the offering before Hecate. But that's, yeah, that's where I end up leaving it, right? And that's kind of become her little sacred area in her house. Would you know that? No, because like I have 8 feet tall pokeweeds that are growing over there. I now have some new plant that has like sprouted up, some kind of squash. I have grape that's growing out of the and it's taken over. And I just looked at my husband, I'm like, well, it's got a life of its own now. I don't even but that was kind of the, you know, the little quiet offering area. For her to have, so that I could have those moments when I can't get out of the house, because usually, you know, I'm not able to go and somewhere and leave an offering. And so giving me that opportunity to go out there and just connect for a few minutes by myself, and having that private moment. And I like that. I like the fact that it's private and it's not a big showy thing. Yeah, I think that's important.
And it's very like liminal and intimate, right? Like it's not, you know, being like in a big temple somewhere and doing this. It's about that kind of intimacy that comes after dark, especially when the moon is obscured because it's the new moon. You know, all of those kind of elements that are involved in doing this. And I love how your space is becoming like a wild Hecate's garden. Christen, you touched on something earlier that I want to circle back to, because I think we might have talked about this briefly before, is like how you are inspired by like some of the other ancient practices that were part of this ritual. So one part of the ritual, the one that we all know, is there was this supper, you took it to a crossroads. We know that part. This was an elaborate, like all day, maybe probably starting at least the night before with the cooking and so on. So it was an elaborate process. And part of that process was the purification of the home. Right. And we've talked about that. I think when we did Culinary Psychopomp, we talked about that. But something that always sits on me is this business about offering household waste, especially like the waste associated with preparing to do the ritual meal. Mm-hmm. And what that means like for us today. Like Amanda, you said, you know, you have it by the compost, and I'm like, oh, that's super in keeping with the ancient practices. Right. And Christen, you were like, this is how the Tiganatis got started. I had some leftovers.
Yeah.
And I know that it can be hard for us to kind of wrap our head around the idea that this mighty goddess that we adore is venerated through, like, the dustpan, what's in the dustpan, or that a sacred space to her is the compost, or that, leftovers are fine. But it's historically accurate. And that they would have done this. Now, of course, our household waste today is very different. And that's why I really like the compost. I feel like the compost bin is sacred to Hecate too, Amanda. I wish it was less sacred to the raccoons and bears, but we're working on that. I don't know.
The chickens love it.
Chickens, right? Like, it's like all the animals love the compost bin, and Hecate, of course, is associated with animals, many animals. Maybe, Christen, you can unpack a little bit, like, the meaning of the kind of messy or ugly side of, like, the household waste, and what meaning that has for you.
Right. So I don't know that I would necessarily call it ugly. Like I was saying, catharma or catharmos is like what this is, the offering of household waste. And you think about in ancient times, like that wouldn't have been straight up garbage. It wouldn't have been like soda cans and like,
I don't know what happened there. Keep talking.
it wouldn't have been like soda cans and like plastic, and it would have been like food scraps or things like that. And I'm really drawn to the idea of purification. For me, it's sort of like a fresh start. It's sort of like pulling myself together and honoring my life, which is honoring Hecate. And I was thinking about this on the way home last night. I'm going to go into left field here for just a second. But I was thinking about how, we talked about the lustral eggs, which lustral means like purifying, or like lustral water, like kernets, or, like, which is essentially like holy water, is cleansing of miasma. And I was thinking about the nature of the offerings. When you think about grain, or you think about eggs, or you think about a lot of these things have like are rooted in like fertility or have regenerative qualities. And there's something about like leaving the offering and trusting that it's going to go where it needs to go. Like I have this thing that I do, and I talked about this in Culinary Psychopath. I will groom my dogs, or if I want to leave an offering of myself, like I'll leave some hair clippings or something, and I'll put that out in the yard. And I have seen birds take the hair and like build nests out of it, and it's like really beautiful to see sort of that cyclical nature of things like being reused, like nature will do what it will, like it will be of use, like you release it and you trust that it goes where it needs to go.
Right. It doesn't just go to waste. It doesn't go to waste. Like you said, like the grain, or the cheese, or the eggs always get eaten here by the wildlife. When I put a raw egg out, they're like, thank you, Cindy. But the rest of it, I mean, and there's no, like, there's fish in it, but there's no, like, I don't know how to say this. There's no flesh, right? There's no animal flesh in this meal. And like you said, it's all, I'm even thinking of, I love it when you go in left field, because I'm like, I'm coming with you. And Amanda's like, oh, this is fun.
I know. I was gonna say, I'm enjoying it.
We're always on the left-hand path. Sometimes we even verge farther to the left around here. That even like the cheese, as it turns to mold.
Yeah.
Like if nobody eats the cheese turns to mold, which the earth needs.
Yeah.
Because just the aspect of, it's just a question we get asked a lot. Like my Cersei's filter started to grow mold, and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. That's great, because it's all like, it's that regeneration.
And I think about we know that these were like offerings but I'm trying to figure out the right way to say this. Like the common person, this is
Yeah.
an offering that the common person would make. And they wouldn't have been rich. And it was different times. Like, the milk from your goat or the eggs from your chickens or like would have been really, really valuable. And like you were saying, as these things start to go, and if you think about the cheese, you think about the vinegar, and you think about the oil, like these are all preservation methods. Like these are all ways to sustain that food and sustain that nourishment. Yeah, so I completely lost my thought here.
No, I'm
But
picking
that's
it
what
up.
happens.
Yeah.
Out of left field.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's something there. There's something there about, like I was saying, just trusting that these things will be of use.
Yes. And I like how you said about sometimes it's a habit, or maybe it's something that you've been carrying, like something that burdens you. And in terms of like what the ancients would have done, their purification, like their miasma removal, that's, we might have different words today in how we describe that process, but it's the same energy, right? Like, when they were dealing with cleansing the miasma in the house, it was like, relationship problems, and they just called it miasma, but now we have different words for that. So for me, like giving up something on the Deipnon is something I often do. And that, like, I know the word sacrifice is really loaded for people, especially like in our self-absorbed modern lives that we all lead. But that the original meal would have been a sacrifice for the family making the meal, for the household making the meal, right? These were valuable items. They could not just go to Whole Foods and grab a gallon of goat milk and it costs a fraction of their household income, right? That would have meant, making sure, like most of these farmers would have been sustenance farmers, or, in the more metropolitan areas, like to go and have to buy these things, there would have been considerable cost, especially the mullet. We riffed about the mullet in Culinary Psychopomp, so we will save our love of the mullet fish for another. you can listen to that episode. So I think about that, like sacrifice, what does that mean in the modern sense? Like if I just go to the store and buy some flatbread and cheese, for me, like that's not much of, I spend like, say I spend $30. That's not really a sacrifice for me.
It works a little differently for me, I think, because I'm a chef, and so offering food is a labor of love, like naturally. But you can see in the photos, if you can see the slides, like I will make the dinner as I would for someone that I really love. Like it's an act of gratitude, it's an act of devotion. And sometimes, my wife has been like, "Where are my fancy pancakes?" like, I'm like, they're for Hekate. Those aren't your pancakes.
I love that. My sons will do that too. They'll be, "Can we eat that?" I'll be like, "Don't touch that cheese. Yeah. You can have some once Hekate gets hers." That's a tradition here.
Yeah.
That whatever it is that we're making, I might taste it to make sure it tastes good, because like you said, it's an offering of love. So whatever it is, I want to make sure the raccoons and the bears and so on and enjoy it. But then we eat after. It's always, we eat the thing after whatever we're offering. Sometimes I do like a frittata for Hekate. And I don't know, like there's something that is so meaningful to me in the process of like researching ancient recipes and then preparing it and honoring Hekate that way. And then even how we're sharing like what our practices are and what we've learned about the history of it in these conversations, like that is an offering that has a lot of meaning it holds so much meaning to me. It's difficult to put it into words. I know when we're going to switch to talking about the cheese, but like when I was making the cheese, I felt, like you said, part of a lineage.
Yeah.
It goes back thousands of years of making cheese for Hekate. I felt connected to something greater than me. And for me, because I do have this like ally ancestor person who I'm very connected with, like almost as a kind of mighty dead figure. Like I feel very connected to her as well when I'm doing this. Like I feel like I am being right. Does that make sense? Like when I do these things, like I am in the right. You know how sometimes whatever you're doing in life, you're like, I am definitely where I'm supposed to be, doing what I should be doing in the way I should be doing it at that moment. And that, for me, that's so much greater than, fussing over the specific ingredients or thing. You know what I mean? Like it's that feeling of being in, like we call it flow, because that's the psychological word a lot of us know. Okay. So when I made this cheese from Dure Rustica by Columella, when did I make it? Like last Thursday, I think it was. I didn't get started till later in the day, and it was a transcendent experience. I mean, I love to cook. Food is definitely a way that I show my love for other people. And I also just I love the process of cooking and creating something. It's magic to me. So I made this cheese and I just felt so connected to that lineage. I felt connected to Hekate. I felt like I was having one of those right place, right time, right moments. I am so much more than this experience. And so let's just talk a little bit about the origins of Columella's cheese. So why, Christen, did we pick to make a fresh cheese as opposed to just going out and buying like a really expensive piece of Parmigiano Reggiano, for example? Like what do you find value in the making it yourself as opposed to buying something like a luxury cheese? Is that a word,
Well,
luxury cheese?
Yeah, luxury cheese is totally a thing.
Okay.
So I mean, I think it comes back to everything that we just said. And there is this sort of, for me, there's almost like this sort of soul code connection to this lineage, right? And just sit with this for a second. Think about this. Thousands of years, like 2,000-year-old lineage of doing this. And it is a labor of love, right? And so I try to put myself often in the mindset of like the average person in ancient times who would be maybe like have a little excess milk, or like want to leave this offering, which like I say milk like it's easy, but it's not easy when you have to get up every morning and like milk your goat and do the things. And it's a labor of love, and that's it. That's all I can say. Really, like it's you're putting effort into it. It's an act of devotion for me.
Yeah, definitely. I had kind of an epic time getting the goat milk for the cheese. I didn't know goat milk was so popular. And so I went into the city and I was going from like locally sourced store to locally sourced store, trying to find some local goat milk. And there was traffic and there was construction and it was hot. And just in the moment of it, I was like, no, it's so fitting that it took me like 3 hours to get goat milk, because I betcha if I tried to milk a goat, it would take me a lot longer than 3 hours to get a gallon of goat milk.
Right.
And it doesn't always turn out. So Amanda, whose Dark Goddess cheesecake is divine, you are bringing the energy of
Yes.
like being real to this. So tell us about your cheese.
Well, Yeah, so I don't even know. I couldn't find goat's milk, and this is what I get for putting too many things on my plate at one time. Could not find goat's milk, and so I used cow's milk because it says you can in the recipe, and I was like, oh, and I'm lactose intolerant, but I was like, well, I'll give it a shot. My family won't appreciate it, but I'll give it a shot. So I tried that, and originally I was going to make the thistle rennet, and then it dried out before I got back from vacation. So that didn't happen. It was like a snowball effect. And I used vinegar, and it just didn't seem to go really well. So I have a small amount of cheese. What I do have tastes fantastic. So I will say that. That's only this like teensy tiny little amount. I'm going to the farmer's market tomorrow, and I'm hoping that one of the farmers has goat milk and I can try it again. But it tastes really good. What did? But it was my husband laughed at me. He thought it was hilarious. Uh that I would add cheese making to my resume. So but I don't give up. So I'll give it a shot again. But I mean it tastes really good. The recipe is good, and I love cheese, but yeah, it's a little frustrating when it doesn't turn out well, and I have my perfectionistic tendencies, so I'm like, "Ah," but there you go, guys. So if you make it, just know it may not turn out well. And I don't know if it's because of the cow's milk. I don't really know.
Well,
I don't
temple
know.
of good enough it, right? Like, like
Yeah,
you found the meaning in it, like you did the
did.
whole experience, and
Mhm.
sometimes it just doesn't turn out. So
Well,
like
and I think I tried it in the morning, so that's part of it. I'm cranky in the mornings.
I got cranky cheese.
I did. I did.
So if you're joining us live, we're going to be transitioning to talking more about the cheese, including a walkthrough of how to make the cheese. If you've joined us for this conversation on the pod, you'll be able to find some links where you can access more information about making the Columella's De Re Rustica cheese. De Re Rustica is the name of Columella's book, which basically means the country life. Or on agriculture. You can find that PDF and find that recipe online just by looking for Columella's cheese. I hope we've inspired you to make your own Hekate supper. Maybe it's going to be a melange of food items, and you'll write an offering as well of what you're giving her, what your release of miasma is, so it can be regenerated. However you celebrate the dark moon as a Hecatean, we hope it brings you a great deal of meaning. And thank you so much for joining us. Bye, everybody.
Hail Hekate.
And hail Hekate.
Have a good day.
The Keeping Her Keys podcast is produced and hosted by me, Cindy Brannon. I'm a witch and psychologist living in coastal Nova Scotia, Canada. I've written several books about Hecate, and also my very first book that's more of an introduction to awakening the witch within. That one's called True Magic. My frequent guests on the show are guides from my school known as Covina, the Coven of Hecate. You'll be listening to them on different episodes, and they are just an amazing group of witches that I am so happy to have in the circle of making this podcast a reality. Episodes usually explore something connected to the goddess Hecate. I became fascinated with the goddess Hecate so long ago. I do deep dives with different partners on goddesses and aspects of Hecate. Sometimes I do more psychospiritual episodes where I talk about constructs and how they intersect with the practice of natural magic. and frequently you'll find meditations. If you're interested in learning more about my work, just go to keepingyourkeys.com. You'll find out more about my books, more about Hekate, and how you can join Covina, the Coven of Hekate. If you enjoy this podcast, be sure to follow it. I usually release new episodes every Thursday. And I would absolutely love it if you could rate and review the podcast. It is so, so helpful. If you have any questions or ideas for future shows, you can send them to info@keepingherkeys.com. Thanks so much for listening, and hail Hekate.